100th anniversary. No one thought they'd last this long. Now they're throwing a party. 100 years of classic films, 100 years of theme parks, 100 years of Christmas parades and new stars, 100 years of working hard in Disney parks. So let's give them a hand for 100 years. From steamboat captains to mermaids, they've been everything in between, and they both still look great. They have barely aged a day. 100 years of magic, 100 years of wonder, 100 years of characters we love to love, love to love. 100 years of Mickey, they have barely aged a day. 100 years of magic, 100 years of Wondy. So let's give them a hand for 100 years. Ooh, it's Mickey and Minnie's 100th anniversary. No one thought they'd last this long. Now they're throwing a party.
Wow. This event is not public anymore. Well, I can't go back to the Celebrate You event. It's just for cast members. Chris is right. Nicodemus, what happened? What happened to the Disneyland Celebrate You event?
You can't go back. It's just for cast members only.
What? Whatever. You can go. I don't care. Alright, welcome back to Road to the Mickey and Minnie's 100th anniversary. This is the final episode of the series, of this series number 1. And we're gonna get started next year. We're starting right after D23 Expo Adventure, and hopefully we're gonna do like a year before Mickey and Minnie's 100th anniversary will be coming up on 2027. I don't know. Maybe in November 2026 will be the next solution. I don't think so. That's a better series. Anyway. So let's talk about the Walt Disney. I was going to read who was Walt Disney. Okay. Let's see. Walt Disney liked being a class clown. He once said he would do anything for attention. His schoolmates are Marceline, Missouri. Loved his performances. Once he caught by felt mouse and made a leash for it out of a string. He waltzed into class and paraded his new pet around the room. Somebody saw the little critter and screamed. Walt's teacher marched right over and put an end into the mischief and punished Walt, but he didn't care. He and his mouse were famous for the day. Walt Disney didn't know it then, but one day another mouse, one named Mickey, made him famous all over the world. Let's take a look at the first chapter where we take place at the farm. On December 5th, 1901, Walt Ellis Disney was born in an upstairs bedroom in a two-story cottage on North Trip Avenue in Chicago. Walt's father, Ellis, had built the house himself. Walt's mother, Flora, was trained as a teacher, but she gave up of a career to raise her 5 children. She was as friendly and warm as her husband was short-tempered and stern. By the time Walt was 4, the neighborhood was growing rough, so the family moved to a farm in Marceline, Missouri. It was the happiest time in Walt's childhood. Walt loved his new home, even though Marceline was a small town. It was still exciting for Walt to head down to the main street with all its little stores. Around the farm were weeping willows and apple, peach, and palm trees. Walt watched rabbits, squirrels, opossums, foxes, and raccoons scurry around the pond. He liked to ride on pigs, even though he often fell off and landed in mud. And he and his friends trotted on Charlie, an old farm horse. Charlie charged through the trees without caring about his riders. Walt had to jump off to keep in the bunk of his head on a branch. Walt's parents and older brothers, Herbert, Raymond, and Roy, were too busy with farm chores to take Walt to school, so he didn't start until he was almost 7. But then his younger sister Ruth, who was 5, was ready for school. 2. Walt said that starting school with his younger sister was the most embarrassing thing that could happen to the fellow. After school, Walt fished and skin dipped. In winter, then it was sledding and skating in a frozen creek. On Sundays, the Disneys visited neighbors. Sometimes Ellis played fiddle. That means violin. It was one of the few times that he saw his father having a good time. Walt wanted to entertain people, to make them have a good time. Once a group of actors came to the town to perform Peter Pan. It was a boy who never grows up. Walt loved the play and got to play Peter in his school's production of the play. His brother Roy hooked up wires to lift Walt into the air. To the audience, it looked like he was flying, but then the wires broke, and Walt went flying into the surprised crowd. Almost as soon as they could hold the pencil, Walt spent hours and hours drawing. He told everybody that he was an artist. His proudest possessions were crayons and drawing paper from Aunt Margaret. Margaret. Walt definitely didn't have talent. His neighbor Doc Sherwood thought Walt was good. It was so good that he asked for a picture for his horse. The horse wouldn't stand still, and Walt had trouble drawing his portrait. But Doc Sherwood and his wife praised the picture. It made Walt very proud. Even drawing could get Walt into trouble. One day he discovered a barrel of a black tar. It was as soft as paint. He and Ruth dipped it in the big sticks into the tar and drew pictures all over the side of their White House. His parents are not at all happy when they saw the artwork. The tar wouldn't come off. Yeah, I remember Peter Pan. It was made in Walt Disney. Was it made in right before it, and in the decades before. And this is a decades before the film was released. Farm life was fun before Walt, but hard for his father. Elvis could steam to grow good crops. The family had never had enough money. Worrying made his father's temper worse. So Walt avoided him as much as possible. He was much closer to the gentle, smiling mother. When Ellis became sick and typhoid, Flora had no choice to sell sell the farm. Walt was heartbroken about leaving Marceline. He started crying at the sight of the farmer buying a young colt that he and Roy had tamed. The colt whined, and Walt, he ran after him and hugged him. The farmer led the colt away. The Disneys next moved to Kansas City, where Elvis ran the newspaper route for the Kansas City Times. Walt had to pinch in too. They started delivering papers at 9 years old. He had to get up every morning before sunrise. Sometimes he was so tired and he curled up in the doorway and fell asleep. When he awoke and ran into the finished paper route and get to school. In class, Walt had a hard time paying attention. One teacher called him a second dumbest in her class. He often daydreamed or thought up ways to make his classmates laugh. He liked to draw funny characters on the blackboard, or he'd draw an animal in the corner of the pages. His textbook. He flipped under the pages. The animal appeared to move. These are his first cartoons. Walt admired Abraham Lincoln. So one day, he made a stovepipe hat out of a cardboard. He put in a fake wart on his cheek, so he could look like Lincoln. He recited the Gettysburg Address for his class. The teacher loved Walt's act. She asked him to perform it for the other classes. That was fine with Walt. He liked showing off. Walt's best friend, who was also named Walt. He liked to perform too. The two Walts dressed up like a film comedian, Charlie Chaplin, and his enemy, the Count. They tried out their act, the talented contests. One time he won a prize, 25 cents each. That's a quarter. So, the Charlie Chaplin, in early days of Hollywood movies, Charlie Chaplin was one of the most famous actors. He was also the writer, director, producer, and composer. He was born in England in 1889 and starred in over 80 films before he died in 1977. That Charlie Chaplin he became a legendary composer, director, writer, and producer. He was born in England, and he died, and he passed away in nearly 50 years ago. Charlie created a funny but sad character called of a little tramp, who starred in the many silent movies. The little tramp wore the tight coat, really baggy pants, big shoes, and a derby hat. He carried a bamboo cane and walked with his toes turned down and was very polite. And he always got himself into ridiculous situations. Walt Disney modeled his first Mickey Mouse on Charlie Chaplin. Walt's artist teacher earned him into free haircuts from a local barber. Neighbors started going into the barber shop to see Walt's new pictures on the wall. Walt loved his little bit of fame. At 15, Walt got to see more of the country. He had a summer job working on a train that traveled between Kansas City, Missouri, and Spiro, Oklahoma. He walked up in this aisle, selling newspapers, candy, and soda, and chatting with people. Sometimes that engineering will let him ride in a coal car. For Walt, that was heaven all his life. He loved trains and carried you in new places, new adventures. To the same man, again, at this time, he got the job. While Walt was working on the post office, two of his brothers, Herbert and Roy, were serving in the army. It was wartime, World War I. The United States joined in a fight against Germany. It was sending thousands of American troops over into Europe. When Walt felt he was missing out of one of the action. To him, the war it seemed like an adventure, but he was too young to enlist. But finally, he convinced his mother to sign papers to permit him to drive an ambulance. He set sail to France in November of 1918. He had not yet turned 17, but he was about to see a whole new world. The thing was, Walt never got near a battlefield. To his disappointment, the fighting had never ended by the time Walt reached France. Instead of rescuing wounded soldiers, he spent much time of his time driving officers around, running errands, and drawing. He drew cartoons all over the canvas, flaps of an ambulance. Walt made extra cash of a dishonest way. He and a friend found some helmets in German soldiers. He scuffed them up but shot holes in them. Then Walt's friend sold them as real war souvenirs. Walt returned home a year later. In October 1919, he was almost 18. His family hardly recognized him because he had grown so much taller. He had filled out of the old to look like the man. Walt was also looked on cigarettes, a terrible habit he never quit. Elvis Disney wanted his son to work in Chicago at the jelly factory, but Walt wasn't interested. Against his father's wishes, he decided to go back to Kansas City and find work as an artist. Walt Disney was ready to strike out on his own. Yeah, World War I is we'll talk about it later. Okay. Here's chapter 4, drawings that move. In Kansas City, Walt teamed up with another artist had a very unusual name, Ub Iwerks. Ub was shy and serious. Not at all that like Walt, Ub was also very talented. The two started their own company. They hoped to create for ads and signs. They had plenty of ideas, They were missing only one thing: customers. The shop closed after only a month. So soon after, Walt and Herb found jobs at the Kansas City Slide Company, and it turned out to be a lucky break. The Slide Company changed Walt's life. He learned about all about animation. Animation is the films of the drawings and that move. Cartoons. The 1920s cartoons were something new. Audiences were amazed that watched drawings for funny people and animals actually moving on the screen. An artist created simple animation. For example, the dog was wagging his tail. But by drawing the same character over and over again, on separate pieces of paper. In each drawing, a position of the tail will be a little different. When the pieces of paper are flipped very fast, to a human eye, the tail appears to be moving. For films, professional animators create an illusion of emotion by recording a scene changes frame by frame. Artists competed in each other to invent new techniques and for cartoons. Walt wanted to get into the action. So he went to the library and took out of a book called Animated Cartoons: How They Are Made, The Origin and Development by Edwin G. Lewis. He studied the book and he set up in a studio in a shed behind the house. Every evening, he drew the cartoon characters in the different positions and filled them. It might take 18 drawings just to show the person raising an arm. Animation takes a lot of time, but hard work never stops Walt. He called his cartoons lavograms. Lavograms. They were silent, but full of slapstick humor, and only lasted of a couple of minutes. Some of it based on fairy tales, but Walt would change his story a little, make it funnier. After selling Lavrogram cartoon into the Newman theaters in Kansas City, they started by a small company to make more. Walt recircuited artists to make cartoons. After all, he couldn't do all of the drawing himself. The problem he couldn't afford to pay the steady salary. Instead, he promised to share any money earned from cartoons. His friend Artworks was few other young man joined Walt with his new business. They spent day drawing characters, making up jokes, and goofing around with a moving camera. Walt worked on a one film called Alice's Wonderland. It was about a real little girl named Alice, played by the 4-year-old actress named Virginia Davis. Alice finds herself in the cartoon world. Mixing live actors with animations was something new. Before he finished Alice's Wonderland, Walt's company went bankrupt. He had to sell his movie camera. Kansas City was not the center of the entertainment business. Walt knew that. He wanted to make it big. He had better go there where movies are made. Hollywood. Making an animated Disney film. Walt Disney and his writers started plotting out of a story scene by scene. Then animators drew each character with thousands of different poses to create an action. Inkers traced the lines of each drawing on pieces of a clear celluloid. Painters colored in on the celluloid drawings. Other artists painted background scenes after camera operators uh, photographed each drawing on a right background. So, sound specialists recorded on the voices that sound effects and added to the background music. Once everything was done, there was still one more thing needed. Walt had to give a final approval. After World War I, Hollywood became a home of film studios such as Universal, Paramount, Warner Brothers, and MGM, Metro, Goldwyn Mayer. Movies are now a big business. In August 1923, Walt packed a cardboard suitcase with his clothes and drawing materials. He bought a train ticket to California, where his older brother Roy was already living. Walt moved in with an uncle, paying a few dollars a month for a room and board. Walt had big dreams for himself, but he certainly didn't look as much of a success, but was sticking thin, wore shabby clothing, and splitified himself as best he could, and went off every movie studio in town. Nobody offered him a job. Nobody offered him a job. So he went back to his own idea of making selling cartoons. In October, and finally got a break. A woman named Margaret Winkler saw and liked what Walt and have done in Alice's Wonderland. She agreed to pay Walt for his series of Alice cartoons. She would sell it to feeders. This was terrific news except for one thing. Walt have only 3 months to make a new film. His young actress Virginia Davis still lived in Kansas City. Also, Walt needed money to make a movie. He didn't even have a movie camera, much less in studio or artists to work with him. Walt turned to his brother Roy for help. Roy was 8 years older than Walt. Unlike Walt, Roy was practical, and he had a good ear for business. So he was to form for Disney Brothers Studio, with a loan of their uncle to some money with their parents. Walt and Roy set up a shop on a small office on the Kingswell Avenue. Walt bought himself a movie camera. And pursued Virginia Davis and her family are moved to Hollywood, and first Walt did all of the creative work in the studio. He thought up the story for each of the Alice movies. He directed of a child star. He drew all of the cartoon characters and put into live action and animation together. He worked so hard that our first film was finished ahead of schedule, but making of the whole series of Alice films was too much work for one man. So Walt hired 3 men to operate the cameras and help with the animation. So he also hired 3 women to ink the paint and the black and white cartoon drawings of the young woman was small and pretty with dark hair. She was named Lillian Bounds. Walt was worried on his own drawings were not good enough. He wanted the cartoon films to be the best in the business. He got in touch with iWorks. Walt convinced Yubi to move out to California and to join a Disney studio. I was talented and fast. He could produce great drawings in no time. Over the years, I didn't move about a drawing, but Walt focuses on thinking up the stories and directing. Together, they created a new character named Oswald the Lucky Rabbit and started making a series of Oswald cartoons. Oswald. And it was smart decision. Oswald was a hit. The studio began selling cartoons on a regular basis. Business was so good, in fact, that Walt and Roy moved to a bigger offices in a Hiberon Avenue, and Walt changed the name of the company. Instead of Disney Brothers Studios, they call it Walt Disney Studios. Did Roy mind? It seemed they didn't. He didn't. All Roy said was,
If that's the way you want it.
it was okay with him. After all, Walt was the one of the making of the cartoons. Walt, under a lot of pressure, he had made it into lots of Oswald cartoons. And do it quickly, he became short-tempered and irritable. He took his worries on his employees. Some quit. They couldn't stand of insult and remarks. Walt couldn't make a real bad, and he wanted to. One of them said. Then something never really nasty happened. Something Walt never expected and didn't deserve. The man named Charlie Mintz, whose company was buying Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons and hired away most of Walt's artists. Mintz decided he didn't need Walt anymore. With Walt's own artists, he could make and sell Oswald cartoons without Walt Disney Studios. While Charlie Mintz was actually against the law, but it was wrong. It was still wrong. Walt was so upset, and he couldn't eat or sleep. Not only he had lost Oswald, but he had been double-crossed. The only way he could save his business and create another cartoon character, an even better one than Oswald. Walt would work like mad on a new idea and kept it in secret. On only a few people, who did the drawing. Walt who was always loyal to his brother. An island who inked the drawings. Who knew about the new character? The new character is going to be a mouse. I guess we're out of time. We're out of time in our program. So we'll see you guys in another episode of a big continuation of part 2 of a finale of Road to the Mickey Minnie's 100th anniversary. See you next time.